editor's notes?
Oh, name and...
Do you want your name?
I don't care. I'm not as scared of anything. I want, you know, this is something that needs to be spoken about and to encourage other women that, you know, I'm not, yeah, I want my voice to be heard.
Okay, so spell your first and last name.
My name is Tana Marie Munoz, and it's spelled T-A-W-N-A-M-U-N-O-Z.
What I'm preparing right now is I'm doing the top layer on the piece that I'm calling Bound Girl. And she's having a skirt to obviously finish off the bottom half. And right now I have it in a gray color, which I really like, but I don't like the seaming in the front. But this is going to be the underlining. So it's going to be like that. So I'm doing an overlay of silk organza that I'm using in most of the pieces. And instead of having a seam showing in the front, I'm going back to my fashion designing days and taking what we'd call as a basic slope, which I've already lengthened and added width, but now I'm gonna, on the top layer of the skirt, add width to create pleats. So that when they look at it finished, they're not gonna see any seams because the seaming will be hidden under the pleats. And I think it will add just a little more dynamic look to it. And the interesting thing about the work I'm doing for this show is I feel like it's a real culmination of all the years leading up to this. It's using my sewing and my fashion, which was my degree. And as much as I enjoyed fashion, it was never in my heart totally. And part of why I got out of it is that it became more of a job than a career. For me, my own journey is coming from not listening to my voice, wanting to other people to encourage them to listen to their voices and to become their strength. And for me, showing signs that I really always wanted to do art, and art about inner beauty and the voice of women. And now, in my early 50s, I'm finally doing what I meant to. And I've really, really enjoyed the show, not only for using my different backgrounds of fashion and sewing, using these materials, but I've been meeting amazing people. You know, I'm not alone in my studio all the time. I'm calling people. I'm working with WISH, which is an amazing organization for women, and meeting all these unbelievably strong, mostly women and some wonderful men that are working to change what's going on in our own city and statewide with abuse. And these people just sacrifice. They don't work. They're not going into it for the money. They spend endless hours, and they're just delightful people. So for me, I just love meeting people. I love feeling like that what my art is doing is opening conversations and has meaning, and just the thought that I'm helping change people's lives is really exciting.
I think this exhibit is different from some of the others that have been shown in the gallery because both aesthetically, because she's going for a really stark kind of minimalist look with her pieces and the impact that it will have when people walk in and see the space, but also it's dealing with issues, with real issues, and not that other artwork doesn't, but you know, it's going to have a very different purpose than, say, a landscape or something like that. So.
I feel like the pieces themselves are kind of evolving, and this is one of them. It's called The Bound Girl, and I was thinking of this as part of the wisdom of older women that she could learn from. So I'm making her a little smaller and bound by maybe family secrets, bound by her own fear, bound by, I guess, again, I'm trying not to say too much as I go on about it, of what people can see. But originally I had the hands clasped like this. And now, because of the pieces, I want the pieces just touching, of a gentleness and of touching. And instead of having her bound tightly, what I'm hoping to do is wrap this, and then these will all be painted. And I don't have it quite the same length, but it's gonna have it starting to come undone, where the hands come together. So I still have to do the technical part, but there's some of it's gonna be left hanging in the sense of, is she still bound, isn't she bound, what does it mean? Can she break her own, what's going on in her life? Can she break it open? Can she live in the gentle touch of just the delicacy of the topic, the delicacy of her?
We know that here in Alaska, we have the highest per capita sexual assault, sexual abuse of a minor, domestic violence, and suicide. And so as a result of that, we're trying to figure out how can we collectively get the community involved in this, and so hopefully to try to at least stem the tide or eliminate this epidemic, because that's what we have. We have an epidemic. And so part of the thing that I have done, in addition to reaching out to the department, local PDs, here in the Ketchikan, for instance, Ketchikan Police Department. Of course, you got the DA's office, Department of Law, but you have the women's advocate group, WISH, IROC, I believe, that's one of the women's group. And in addition to that, you need the community. It's a community effort, and so yes, you can have your different organization, law enforcement, Department of Law, the health department, and so forth. But if we can get the community to be involved in that as well, that's how we're going to be able to stem this epidemic. We need everybody. We need business. We need the Chamber of Commerce. We need everybody, as we say, all hands on deck.
In the past year, we've made a much more fervent attempt to get involved with the other agencies in Ketchikan that are providing more prevention as well as intervention programs. We participated in a 3-day summit that was sponsored by the governor's office. And one of the big take-home messages for me from that conference was that if we don't go upstream and kind of meet people in the positions of power in our community and talk about violence, that we really can't make effective change from the bottom up. It's really important for us to get to those people that make decisions and make changes with laws and with enforcing social norms in our community, because if we don't go about things having conversations except when people are in crisis, that there really isn't effective change, and there isn't a chance for people to actually talk about and imagine a community free of violence. You know, if you've ever experienced violence or had somebody share their story with you, it's really, it's hard to talk about how and why men or partners, same-sex partners, but typically men, would be violent. We don't sit and speculate. When we're working with victims, we're talking about problem solving. We're talking about today and tomorrow. We're not projecting, world peace or, relationship peace and future generations. We can't talk about that because the immediate need is what we need to be dealing with.
I never thought I would ever be involved in something like this, ever in my life. It's funny how how it occurs. You don't realize it, you don't see it until it's like too late. You're right in the middle of it, and then you're like, what could you do? What could you do? Because he has that control, and you have nowhere to go. I'm from California, and I was brought from California all the way up here to start all over. It was supposed to be, let's start fresh. He's a Bering Sea fisherman, and we're going to start our whole life new. You know, so we left I left California. He paid for my ticket, came up here. The summer was great, and then like the beginning of winter or whatever, I saw different things started to change, and this was like 3 years ago. 3 years ago when I came up here, things were changing, and I would start noticing, asking him questions and stuff, and he would say, "Oh, you're tripping, you know, shut up," or whatever. But it started to progress with name calling, get away, leaving me at home, no money, and it was like, you know, what am I to do, you know? So, well, finally I said something about it, and that's where it began, you know. I turned to alcohol. I turned to alcohol to just forget about it. I thought, you know, things would change. The more I drank, the more I forgot. The more it was just, I didn't think about it, you know, as long as I had my alcohol, you know, I didn't care. Well, it got worse. I was in and out at Wish. I would, you know, go to Wish. Finally, you know, it got really serious, and I couldn't take it anymore, and I needed help. I seriously needed help, and I went to a church, and they told me about Wish. So I got to meet the ladies there at Wish, and so for 3 years after that, you know, I've been in and out of Wish, and they never gave up on me. They never gave up on me at all. They saw something in me that I didn't see, you know. They loved me when I couldn't love myself. They were there for me when nobody was there for me.
I'm a resource specialist and advocate with WISH, and so I work with the women on a daily basis. My perspective tends to be a little bit different. I mean, I'm also a survivor. You know, I grew up in an abusive home. I was physically abused by my dad, emotionally abused by my mom, molested by an uncle for years. And so, you know, when I sit down and, you know, I talk to the women and, you know, what they're going through, you know, the first response is, you know, always, you know, oh man, working at a women's shelter, you know. But the big thing that I really wanted to say is, you know, I've heard the question asked, you know, what would you say to, you know, women who are, you know, wondering about their situation? And if you're questioning whether or not you're in a domestic violence situation, you need to talk to somebody. You know, call an advocate, call a shelter, call a therapist, a friend, a family member. Find somebody to talk to, you know, because if you're having those feelings, it's for a reason. If you're questioning it, there's something in your life, you know, that needs to be examined. And getting that outside perspective is necessary.
Basically, what we're doing is taking a tough subject and bringing it in a very safe environment and opening this topic to people who may not normally be interested in going to hear talk about a shelter. They care, but you know, it's not their interest, because domestic abuse is a community problem. And I've learned so much about it through these women, through reading and such, that you can't say it doesn't affect us. And especially with Ketchikan's rates, as we now know through the release of the report, that half of all women in Ketchikan have experienced domestic abuse in their lifetime. So part of the show for me is the hopes that we're going to collect wisdom, because the whole thing is unheard voices, unheard wisdom. So I'm hoping that part of our installation is we have a door that's leaning against there that was also donated and delivered to me. And that door is where we're going to collect wisdom, because I feel to really solve a problem, you need to talk to the people who survive the problem. For us to sit and take on domestic abuse, unless you've really experienced it yourself or studied it, it's just such a complex thing. And what I've learned is just, you know, these predators, they're not dumb, they're smart. I mean, people think, well, why doesn't she just walk away? But the grooming they do, the manipulation, the control, it's a subtle thing that goes on for a period of time until the woman's isolated or removed. And very interestingly, people think it's a socioeconomic thing, it's lower income, but it happens too. It doesn't matter your skin color, it doesn't matter your income. One of the differences is if you have more income, you have more opportunities to escape or resources that's not available to all women, unfortunately.
When I met him, I was in the middle of a separation that turned into a divorce, a 21-year marriage. And I wanted out of the state of Washington. I had to get away from all the chaos and drama from my divorce. So I meet this guy who seems really, really nice. And one of the first questions I asked him was, have you ever hit a woman? Of course, he answered no. But that was in August, 2 years ago now. We hung out together for like a month and a half, and then he had to come back up here. We continued to talk over the phone and everything, and he convinced me to come up here. It'd be wonderful. There's schooling, there's jobs, there's, you know, just all kinds of opportunity. And so I came up on the ferry. We went to the really, really secluded little island where there was absolutely nothing there. I mean, I got to see the ocean, but everything went fine for the first 2 weeks. And then because he is an alcoholic and verbally and emotionally abusive, that I noticed right off the bat. But 2 weeks after I got there, he hit me like I was a full-grown man 3 times, right in the face. And I carried around a black eye for 3 weeks. And that's where I met the pastor and his wife. The first time I meet them, I was taking his daughter to a Wednesday, it's like Sun Explosion or something they do for children in this place. And I met the pastor's wife with a big, huge black eye that lasted 3 weeks. And he wouldn't let me talk to anybody there. He would, you know, and I got beat, I would say, and 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Yeah, just because he was an alcoholic and he would fly off the handle. And nothing I did was right. Nothing I said was correct. I was stupid. I was, you know, not worth anything. Nobody would help me. You know, I didn't even have phone service out there. There's no cell service where I was. And the first night that he beat me, I ran out of that place, went down to a payphone, and they wouldn't even let me make a collect call back to where my family is so that I could try to get some help out. And this went on, but from that second forward, I concentrated on trying to meet the right people to secretly get away from him. It took me, let's see, that was in November, and so I got out of there on March 11th. Divine intervention, I call it divine intervention. I met a really nice woman who was really close with the pastor and his wife, and she talked to them secretly about helping me get out of there because the whole town had seen me with black eyes and bruises, and after about the 3rd black eye, he quit hitting me in the face, but all over my body. He, you know, would hit me, shove me into walls, you know, smack me in the back of the head, and it was scary because this man has a lot of guns. And he would tell me that, you know, people disappear all the time in Alaska. You think you're leaving me?
I think providers often have some awkwardness about asking the question. And then sometimes it seems like until the woman has met you, maybe even over a course of a couple of years, there's a reluctance to tell you anything about it. And then at some point they're ready and they'll give the information. Somebody that has really dealt with the abuse and they've already separated or they've, you know, sought help, they'll come in and be very frank. They'll openly tell you a lot of that stuff. But
it is hard because I think during the times when women disclose or are at that point where they are ready to leave and kind of in the thick of it, that is the most dangerous time for those women. And so it is a really difficult time. They have to be ready, but realizing that once they disclose or if they start to make that that jump where they're leaving that relationship, that can be very dangerous for them and their family. So it is hard, yeah. But I think with me, when I'm, as a healthcare provider, because it is so common, I try to normalize it. And so I try in every certainly annual exam.
Wish has been real helpful too, because at least you're kind of giving information. They don't have to give you anything back, but just saying, you know, are you safe, and do you know that if you needed to, you could go to Wish, even if you don't have money, that it would be covered to go there. So trying to give them some idea of what they do to protect themselves. The other thing is trying to get them to think about if there is some part of them not feeling safe. They usually have small children at home too, and you know, just getting them to think about they're the protector for the children, so to acknowledge it enough to figure out how they would take care of all of them.
We went out in a canoe because I was trying to walk on eggshells, basically, keep it quiet until I could get out. And about 2 days before I finally did get out, he decided he wanted to go like duck hunting. Brought I think it was a 12-gauge shotgun, and while we're rowing over to the little place where he wanted to go shoot a duck, he looked right at me and said, "If you think you're leaving me, you're wrong. People disappear all the time," and he had a gun. So I played really, really nice, told him I wasn't gonna leave him. I was just upset that, you know, things needed to get better. But in the back of my mind, I didn't doubt him for a second. He wasn't gonna try to get rid of me, just the way he was. But on March 10th, the pastor and his wife, I was having lunch with the lady that had been talking to them, and we weren't expecting them to show up, but we heard a knock at the door, and it was the pastor and his wife, and they sat me down and talked to me and said if I wanted out of there, right now is the time. And it came at the right moment, because he was off working for a friend, and he had his daughter with him. So I didn't second guess it. I didn't wait. I said, yes, I want out now. I'm done. I can't take no more. And they filled up the gas tank in my car, gave me snacks, and gave me, they sent me to another safe place on this secluded island to stay, and people got on the ferry with me to watch me, because we did not know what this man was going to do. If he could make it to wherever, he probably would have killed me. But it was divine intervention. They followed me all the way over here, and I met the people at Wish. They're very lovely people. Everyone there is caring, and they helped me. And it's helped me a lot put it behind me. It was like, okay, this was just one bad moment in time. I'm strong, I am a survivor, and this will never happen again, and it shouldn't happen. But women who are in these situations shouldn't hide in shame. They shouldn't. They should reach out for help. Go to a church, go to your neighbor, go to the police. You know, you can sneak and do this. I'm sure that you can't be watched 24 hours a day. If you got 5 free minutes, you call somebody, or you ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because I don't think there's one person out there that would turn you down if you explained your story, that this man is beating me. You know, he's not just physically abusive, but mentally, emotionally, and it does wear on you. But I thank goodness I was strong enough to take that, and I knew how to walk on eggshells to get around it and make him think that I wasn't going to leave him. But I knew I was. I knew I was. And divine intervention, it goes back to that. It was just everything aligned perfectly that day for me to finally get out of there.
I think there definitely is still a stigma, and I haven't been here in Ketchikan for a long time, and I have worked in women's shelters and other places, but I feel like there is still, I would say, a stigma. People are accepting, and as Marta was saying, just Wish has been, I think, is a really great organization and a safe place for women here. But I know even, I think that the real safety issues as well as the stigma, I can think of one mom that I was working with who we gave her the information, but then she gave, you know, just on a slip of paper, you know, here's a number to call, here's the hotline, if you're not safe. And then, but then she gave that to her 9-year-old to put in, you know, her 9-year-old's backpack or something, because she knew that if she even had, if somebody found that piece of paper, her abuser or partner, that would be a real safety risk. But in terms of a social stigma, I also feel that
that people don't want to talk about it, and that it is still, I think a lot of women feel like somehow it's their fault. And so even admitting, you know, that they're in this relationship when it clearly is not their fault, but they still feel like somehow they're weak or they don't want to admit that they need help.
I got a close friend who was a powerful midwife, very independent functioning, and in a relationship that was abusive to the point she went running over to the neighbor's house one time and cowered at his feet. He had to pull a gun to keep the guy off of her. But so there's all sorts of blame, because you know, you're thinking, you know, I'm supposed to be the independent woman, and you can't protect yourself, and then you're blaming yourself. What did you do to elicit it too? So.
Yeah.
This piece is a two-part piece, and what we're doing is we're having, this is where my friend Matt is coming in to help me, he is 3D printing hands that will be coming out of the wall and holding this as basically a puppeteer would and controlling the string. So it's going to have a string very similar to this, and I'm going to put it up here so you can see it. And originally I was going to have it hanging here like being with the hands, but it kind of looked too playful. So we're going to have it like this, and instead of having it a puppet, basically still using the strings, but having just two strings going up to the hands when it's a lower piece. So it will look down, she will look defeated, and it still has the thing of the controlled hands. And the hopes of the show is conversations that people can live their best life. I mean, this isn't the best story for her life, nor is it for the perpetrator. And so my hope is to start dialogues and to start healing the stories that these people are living so that they can live a better story, and to share their stories with the young people and the young girls and even the young men that maybe watched, unfortunately, their fathers hit their mothers or abuse, because they are at higher risk, that they will maybe stop and get help or look for better mentors in their lives so that they will not carry on that possibly family tradition that they saw in their own homes.
Growing up, my childhood was violent too. My parents fought a lot, you know, and I never wanted to live like that. But my grandparents and especially my one uncle, he had passed away just the year before I met this coward, and it might sound a little crazy, but I could hear his voice telling me, "You're fine, you're strong, you're gonna be okay," and things like that. It helped get me through what I was going through. But I chalk up my strength to my grandparents and the good people that they were, you know. Oh, when the ferry pulled away from the dock, I was so relieved that I was away from him. I knew I was safe. I was on my way to an even safer place at Wish. It was just like 3,000 pounds was lifted off me. I wasn't scared anymore. I didn't have to walk on eggshells. It was an amazing feeling when I finally got here. What I would tell young women that are in, you know, just starting out in their first relationship or whatever, there are red flags. If they're verbally abusive, if they call you names, you know, if they try to tell you what you can and cannot do, those are red flags. Because it goes, you know, it'll start out with verbal abuse and you know, just the mental stuff. And then it goes to physical. And once a man hits you, he can say sorry 100 million times. He will hit you again. He will hit you again. That was my experience, the whole, you know, I'm sorry after, you know, I got black-eyed and bruised all over. They will hit you again. Get out. Get out. Ask for help.
Every woman that has been through domestic violence knows it just gets worse and worse and worse, never better. He left and came back from Bristol Bay, and that same night he beat me mind you now, he hasn't touched me all the way until up to now. And he beat me, I was so unrecognizable, he beat me to death almost. And I had my knee surgery done, and I called somebody, you know, they heard me, they heard what happened, the police came. Mind you, the police didn't do a thing. They saw me and didn't do anything. Besides, I was scared. And I just didn't say anything. The next morning he came, and I was getting my stuff ready, and he goes, "Where do you think you're going?" And I says, I mean, I just was packing. I was hurry up and to get out of there. Anyways, to make the story short, I got away. They came and picked me up, and I have not turned back ever since. I got there in September. It was like about September 9th or whatever. And this lady from the shelter came and says, "Well, I'm going to a meeting." And I said, "Okay." I said, "What kind of meeting?" She goes, "I'm going to an AA meeting. You want to go?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And I never looked back. And this month on the 11th, I'll have 18 months clean and sober. And now I'm working for Wish, you know. They always used to tell me, "Tana, you know what? You're gonna make it. You're gonna be working here. I can see you working here." And I didn't believe it. I couldn't. I hated everybody. I was so mean. I did so many bad things in there. I stashed my bottles inside my leg when I was staying there, things like that, you know. And now they're helping me. They're getting my, you know, up here it's hard to get dental work done, so they're helping me with that. I got my own apartment now, you know. I have a 2-bedroom. It's just amazing what God has done for me in my life, and that I never gave up, you know, and they never gave up on me. And just don't give up before 5 minutes before the miracle. You don't want to do that. You just want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because there's a sickness out there, and it's alcohol, drugs, domestic violence, and all that combination. It's bad. It's real bad.
I don't think you can talk about sexual abuse without talking about alcohol, drugs. So we're seeing a fair amount of that. And then I've talked to women who have gone out drinking. The date rape stuff has been slipped to them. They don't remember anything, so there's been assault that's happened after that. Certainly it's a difficult thing for police because you have you don't even have a witness that can testify what's happened to them. I don't know. It's one of those dead ends that you know what's going on, but trying to know when it's happening and how to deal with it.
We also are going to have some special advocates there because some of this might trigger people that they've kind of suppressed some memories or experiences their mothers had or friends that may trigger responses. And part of it for me is art is an international language. You don't have to come from a certain background, a certain economics, or a certain language. It speaks to everybody, and how it speaks is differently. And often what we can put in words, an art piece can capture something totally different and something maybe even deeper, because it taps into what I think is a different part of our brain and a different part of our emotion. And so that's why I think the power of the show and art maybe reach in a different way. And not that the written materials and all the research is very, very important. This is just coming at a different angle for people to understand the problem and maybe start the healing themselves. Because I have met women who were date raped who are now 80 and have never healed from that or had anybody to talk to, because for many years we had to be silent about it. And now that is part of women speaking up and do not want to be silent anymore. This is the first piece I created, and this one's actually going to be held from the ceiling, and I have to do a little work on the skirt, but the legs aren't going to be legs. They're actually a man's arms, which to me is part of the sexual assault of the man violating the woman. And what I like about it is the delicacy and just the beauty and kind of the innocence. And it's one of these pieces that people do a double take because they go, oh, look at the pretty dress. And that's part of what I like, is that it's subtle because it's there, but also the power of what abuse can do to a woman. And so the subtlety and kind of the hidden behind layers, but it's there. And that's what I'm hoping with this one.
There's some point when you get depressed or you realize you are caught in domestic violence where I think you can acknowledge it and you would go for help. But that first time walking into the office, I mean, that's a huge step, you know, just to get to where you'd acknowledge it. When we're seeing people in the office, a lot of them are hedging around it, and there are so many problems, it's hard to know where to send them. They aren't ready to go to Wish, or say, you know, they aren't ready to separate out of the home, but there's this brewing stuff that's happening at home, and that gets real hard to know how to help them.
If they can draw on the strength that that's inherent by just surviving. I mean, you just doing that, just being in those relationships day after day, like you've already survived. And then if you can just be empowered to know that it's not your fault and it's not right and it shouldn't be happening, even though it's so normal.
Well, you got red flags. It's all about power and control. And I mean, those are the red flags. You know, if you can't be you on your own without them saying something, that's a red flag right there. You know, you should be able to feel safe and voice your opinion. You know, women do women things, men do men things. If a man's going to tell you how to do a woman thing, how it can't be, you know, because he's not a woman. You know, he's not a woman. He can never feel or be a woman. You know, I mean, leave the man stuff for the man and the women for the women. But if they're telling you, that's control. It's control, and if you're being put down all the time, I mean, it's only obvious. Love is love, and it feels good. It's happy, joy, sunshine. I mean, it's beautiful. It's not pain, you know. It's not pain. It should never be painful, you know.
So, you're a survivor.
Yes, I am a survivor. I am a very big success, and I don't mind saying that.
This is actually one of those aha moments I had when I sketched these, when I first came up with the title of the show, and that's part of, to me, this message was ready to come out, and I just feel lucky enough to be the facilitator or part of helping it come to the public. And one of the first images I came up with was see no evil, hear no evil, say no evil. And this hazard tape, which is really fun because it's tape my daughter has used in her bedroom, but the hazard tape of, this is a hazardous topic. This is a challenging topic. It's hazardous in many ways. It's hazardous if we don't talk about it. But when I read in the book of Trauma and Recovery, where they compare domestic violence with war trauma, that's how impactful and how strong it is. What they said in the book is basically silence helps the perpetrator. When you don't say anything about what you see going on, you're not helping the victim, you're actually empowering the perpetrator. And that's when they get bolder and bolder. And to help the victims is difficult because we have to go in and absorb their pain or be open to their world and see a glimpse of evil. And an evil that we often would like to pretend doesn't exist. If it's not in our world, it doesn't exist. But at the same time, the evil that is going on in the house down the street does end up affecting our community as a whole.
It just wasn't right. It wasn't fair to me, and I know I'm better than that. You know, I was raised better than that. My mom, you know, she raised us with love. And when you know, I had a good education, a good upbringing, and something was wrong here, you know? It just wasn't right. I just, you know, there was something in me, I guess, that felt not worthy, because you get told so much, you know, and you do your best out there, and it's still not enough. And I just couldn't take it anymore. Enough was enough. And I cried out. I said, God, please, enough is enough, you know, help me. And within a month, I'm not kidding you, within a month, I had my own apartment. I went to my AA meetings 90, you know, that's doing 90 straight days of meetings, and plus another 90. I, you know, did not miss a meeting. I was starving, and just starving for that fellowship, for that, that healing.
Tomorrow is the opening, and it's been amazing how many people have stopped me on the street and asked me how it's going, and I kind of think I have this overwhelmed, excited, but also peaceful feeling about the show, because from its inception, I just knew the show was supposed to happen, and I could not tell you logically why, but it just had its own power and voice. And it's a story of a lot of history, and I feel like it's the culmination of my work as a fashion designer and as a mother and just as a woman, and wanting women's voices to be told. And I saw this whole population of women that were heard or not reaching their full potential. And part of my questioning on becoming the wise woman of my painting series is, well, why? And to talk and have conversations. So it's been really meaningful. The other day, one of my dearest friends, who's just a wonderful woman, came up and she said, Carmel, kind of hesitantly, and she said, I don't really know anything about this topic, and it doesn't make me feel really comfortable, but I want to come to your show and I want to learn more about why you've dedicated so much of basically this last year of my life for this show. And I keep hearing that, like, people who normally don't want to venture into this topic are curious. And I have no idea how many are going to show up, but 2 men in the hardware store told me this morning they're coming. I mean, people that don't even come to art openings, or a few that I've made contact with that I see as community leaders, looked at the opening, but they jumped right to the community conversation. And that's fine with me too, because this is bringing the topic to people who wouldn't normally address it in such a way. I'm really excited because it's what I wanted. I wanted it very elegant and special, because some of the survivors who are just coming out of it, I wanted them to be treated with respect, the subject, and classy, in a safe environment. People really would like to not think that this problem is in their community. And I think the timing of the show happened when it's supposed to happen. So now people are curious, okay, you know, half the women in my community have been affected. Who are these women? What's it about? And so by the art, we have quotes. We have beautiful quotes. We have beautiful quotes for the little girls' dresses. Had amazing response because of the innocence. And there's a beautiful quote about, you know, how we need to protect our innocent ones, and that's starting with our children. A beautiful quote for one that's a little more graphic about sexual assault and having a woman use words, what it was like for her to be raped. And just bringing us into that, because the silence that we like to keep, we're only helping the perpetrators. We're not helping the victims. And to help the victims, we have to honor the pain and kind of step into it. And if we don't have that skill set, fund people who can, or support the people to honor that there are people who are gifted to hear these stories. But we need to support those people.
If it's difficult and you're having a hard time, find a way to get it out. Find somebody you can tell, find somebody you can talk to. Everybody needs to spend more time talking and listening. And that's the big thing. There's so many people out there who aren't listened to. And the recent reports of, you know, the Justice Report talking about 50% of the women in this community, you know, experience domestic violence or sexual assault at some point in their lifetime here. It's staggering. But the part that nobody's really talking about is, it stands to reason that if 50% of the women are being abused at some point here, then that probably means that 50% of the men are perpetrating that violence. You know, and so half of everybody who lives here is either a victim or a perpetrator. And that should be an alarm going off to the people here. We don't just need to talk about it. It's not just fundraisers or art shows or Wish or, you know, anything. It's something that we all need to take serious. And that's mostly what I wanted to be able to say. So, thank you guys for all of this. I know this is a big deal, but it's important for everybody.
I think in the 70s, you didn't expose it, you didn't talk about it. If I went in and told my provider they didn't know how to deal with it, they wouldn't report it because it was my issue to report. And that it's changed somewhere. We really are calling it out more than it used to be. You know, I'm required to report if I know some of this stuff. Though it's still difficult for adult women, I'm not required to report if an adult woman's being abused, just if it's a child. We put up with it for so long. You know, you don't punish people enough, even though you've heard it. And not that I think there's all this punishment, but we just haven't called it out. It's been an accepted part of the culture.
Yeah, and I think I've lived and worked in several different countries as well, and it is interesting. It is so accepted, unfortunately, in so many different cultures. Clearly here, here in Alaska and you know, different communities here, but I spent a lot of time in the Middle East and in Africa as well, and there you see it in a different way, and yet you still see women and young girls coming forward, and it is really powerful. And I think all different cultures, even cultures which traditionally might be viewed as subjecting women to kind of more, you know, across the board suppression and violence, like those women too are coming out and changing lives and saying, you know, this isn't right. So I do feel like clearly I'm a younger woman, but in my career still I've seen women, I think that it is changing. I think people are saying it's, you know, enough is enough, and yeah.
All of these prevention efforts add up to social change. It does. It just, you know, a little event here and then another little event there, and you get different people. You're hitting different parts of the community that hear things in a different way. When we did the 1 Billion Rising, we were at the high school, and it was the junior varsity girls team, and you know, we got the cheerleaders involved, we got the pep band involved, we got the pep club, and you know, there was some jabbing and poking in the audience. You know, they were going, hey, you know, look at the sign says, you know, rape is wrong on it, and they're, you know, giggles and things. But they got up and they walked with us, and we walked around the gym 4 times. And the girls, I was just watching them, you know, the girls and the cheerleaders and the pep band, and we're going, yeah, you know, you need to, you know, own your body. You need to say no, and it's okay. And these girls were like, oh yeah, you know, and you know, yeah, I want to walk with them, you know. And they realized what we were talking about was anti-sexual violence, and that dating violence, it's an issue, it's a problem, and these girls experience pressure. And how do they stand up against pressure? You know, how is it that we as adults can help them stand up against pressure like that? So it was really neat.
My daughter asked my husband not long ago, do you love Mom? And he said, well, it's changed, it's commitment. Yes, I love her, but it's a different kind of love, and it's that love that lasts 20, 30, 40, 50 years that we need to model to children. We need to make choices, and I guess that's one of the things I've seen through this show and watching my athletic daughter with sports is choices. Winning teams choose to be winners. They choose to use each other. You know, the strongest defense, they need the shooter, they need all their players to come together and make a choice. So I see the show a lot like that we as individuals need to choose to be strong. We need to come together with strong other community members to help the whole team, the whole town become strong.
There's such a stereotype and a stigma out there with girls nowadays. You see it all over the internet and all over TV, and they're sold on how you're supposed to look and your role. And I want the girls to be proud of who they are. I want them to be tough. We talk about toughness all the time, able to communicate. Basketball is a game. Games are fun. But the tools you can learn in basketball, the communication, the teamwork, the pride, those things can carry on in life and make them more successful in everything they do, including their relationships. What we need to understand as coaches and educators and leaders in a community, the impact individually that we can make on one kid, it really is breaking a chain, showing how unacceptable it really is. And that happened to me, at a young age. There's a couple gentlemen that really took me under their wing, teachers actually, and you could edit it, or Mr. Wicker. I've been with Bill Wicker since I was 11 years old, and he's kind of that positive figure that grabbed me when I was 11, and he knew the things I was going through. And to this day, I mean, it's been 26 years now we've been together, and I pretty much owe the person I am to Bill Wicker. And I don't think enough teachers anymore realize the impacts they can have individually on kids. Every day in our class, there's 1 or 2 kids that see this domestic violence pretty often. And we get so busy and we get wrapped up into standardized testing and all this stuff. We need to take a deep breath and realize why we became teachers and the impacts we can have on kids. The best thing you can do for a kid that's frustrated is just listen to them and stop interrupting them, and then just be there to support them. And that's why I became a teacher, and because another teacher did those things for me. And it's our responsibility. And if we don't want that responsibility, we need to find another profession.
And I want to tell all the women that are out there, you got to step out of that. You got to just step out of it. It's going to be scary, because I didn't know anybody. I have no family up here whatsoever. But, there was one thing that I'm a people person, but never did I ever think I would be in an office or even dealing hands-on with women and things like this. And it's amazing. It's so rewarding. I mean, I wake up every morning and I thank the Lord for this gift He's given me. It's a blessing every single day, and I'm learning. And you know what, above all, the healing. You can feel Him, just the healing in you. It's amazing. I wish you could touch me and just feel what I feel, It's so amazing.
Initially, I only worked with the victims, and then I started working with the men in the men's program. And I think over those years, I've learned to not be afraid of the men in their stories and how they came into the program, but to have empathy and some understanding of how they got there, but not to give them permission to continue their behaviors. We had an on-site evaluator come down from the Council on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, who was one of our funders for our Batters program, and we had her spend time with our program participants, and she interviewed one of our men, and then we had her interview the partner too. And when he first entered the program, he would come to group at night and he would be angry when he left, and he'd slam the door on his way out, and the night before he'd be going, I have to go to that group again tomorrow night. And she would be walking on eggshells that day, because she knew that it was going to be rough and that they'd probably get in an argument before he left. But over a short period of time, just a couple, weeks into it, where he suddenly came home after group one day and he pulled out the homework and he said, "This is what we did." And I get it. And it was just, like to me, I'm going, are you serious? He actually pulled out his homework and showed it to you and said he understood something, and then he apologized, for what he had done. And then he realized that the things that were beyond the physical violence were violent as well. The behaviors that led up to the physical violence were, coercion, isolation, excessive jealousy, and that those things are violent and those things are abuse. And so, it's a process. She said she was ready to leave him, and that, they had a baby together, and she didn't want to raise a daughter in that environment where, she was afraid of the father. She said it's better to be without a father than to have a father that treats the mother in that way. And she's right about that it isn't okay to raise little girls in that environment, to be afraid of their father, that's just the way it is for girls. And maybe, someday you'll get married and you'll have to be careful. You'll need to watch what you say and watch what you do. And you don't need to, your hopes and dreams, well, maybe, but maybe not. It's just life. And so, he is changing. He's still in the group today, but he'll be graduating next week. And, it's just, when I think about it, I think, I have the very best of, hopes and wishes for them as a family as they go forward. She's going to have another baby soon, and I just think, what? He's not going to live out that legacy that was handed down to him by his father. His father was heavy-handed with him as a child and heavy-handed with his mother, and, he had some beliefs in his life that were given to him that he didn't ask for, and he had to unteach himself that with the help of people in his life and the program and the system. It's 36 weeks long, when men have a chance to change in that amount of time. New habits aren't easy, and if you're going to really commit to changing, you really can. It's not going to be overnight. So.
What would I say to a man who causes harm to a woman? Get help. I mean, seriously, please get help. I mean, they might have seen it. They've probably, it's a sickness because they were either brought up that way because of their parents, but their parents were brought up from their parents, and it's a cycle. It just goes. Well, break that cycle, break that chain. You have to break that chain and seek help. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed. What makes a man, what takes a man? A man is, how I feel, if a man cries, that's powerful, that's beautiful, because he feels and he knows right from wrong. Not this men don't cry, baloney. Get help. Come to our day service here at Wish. We'll help you. We have like little groups and stuff like that. Come and talk to Sean. He'll help you, or come and see me. Is there something, let's see, you didn't ask me, that I would say? Just don't give up. Don't give up whatever you do. Don't be embarrassed. And get the heck out of there as soon as you can. Get out, and we'll help you.